Welcome back to the Fuzz Academy. It's time for video 2 on my series on Nomad Sculpt. Last time we learned a little bit about what the terms in 3D modeling are. We learned a lot about setting up the workspace, but today we're going to get right down to actually modeling. So let's just jump right in here. All right, so last time we set up our workspace, we moved some tools around, we got things a little bit more ready to work with as a left-handed person, moving things to the right that I'm going to be using with my right hand, that kind of stuff. But today I want to focus on making a head. We're going to be looking at making a fursuit style head, and I'm going to be doing a lot of the tools, the brushes, things like that to make that happen. And we're going to just jump in right now. We're going to go to our scene tab, add a sphere, and we're going to use that to build everything off of. We're going to have to validate it before we go any further. And you'll notice that it has the subdivided surfaces. I tend to just like deleting those. You can also change it so when you add it, it doesn't have that. But for me, I tend to work faster without having to go through those advanced settings every time. So the move tool is the first tool I want to use. It is a brush that allows us to grab things and move them around in space. On the right side, for all of our brushes, anything like clay, drag, move, brush, flatten, there's going to be a couple of sliders that allow us to adjust things accordingly. The top one is our radius, so if I make that bigger, you can see it gets bigger or smaller accordingly. The bottom is the intensity, and you'll see that if I have the intensity set to low and I grab and I pull, it moves very little. If I grab and move it all the way up and pull, it moves very aggressively. So the intensity has to do with how much it grabs and does what you're trying to do with that brush. Another important thing to remember is symmetry. If you're working it like I do, where the heads are symmetrical, you want to make sure that symmetry button is turned on. If I turn it off, you'll see that it only grabs one side. Once I have it turned on, you'll see that not only will it grab both sides, but there's also a little red dot on the opposite side that shows me where my cursor is over there and that I'm working on both sides. So super important to remember. And then finally, there's a couple small tips. On either of these sliders, if you move up or down directly on the slider, it moves accordingly, matches your finger pretty well. But if you grab and pull it into the space and then move it up or down, you'll see that it moves a little bit differently. It's a lot slower. So if you need to be a little bit more precise about how big your radius is or how intense the brush is, you can adjust it right there. And also we still have the finger shortcuts. So 3 fingers left and right will allow us to adjust the intensity. 3 fingers up and down will allow us to adjust the radius. So a bunch of different ways to do the same sorts of things depending on how you want to work. All right, now I'm going to home this, make sure I'm working from the front. And I'm going to adjust the head shape a little bit, try to get it to something that I kind of like working with. You know, from the front view, that looks pretty happy for me. I'm going to maybe adjust a little bit here. You'll notice that the iPad's Apple Pencil, the newer generation, has tilt in it. So I can actually adjust by tilting the brush as opposed to just moving things around. I find that to be super helpful when dealing with very specific geometry, trying to get the shapes that I want. And then I'm going to go to the left side here. It's got a funky little shape. I'm going to flatten the front of the face out a little bit, flatten the back, move things around, and make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And yeah, so that's a super rough shape of what I want to do for the head shape. And it covers the move tool pretty well. Next up, I want to do the muzzle. I'm actually going to get rid of the wireframe here, and I'm going to go ahead and add in another sphere. I'm going to X-ray this, or I'm going to solo this for a second. So now it's the only thing we see. I want to play with the Gizmo Tool next. The Gizmo Tool is a tool that allows us to do a bunch of editing, but very specifically on the shape as a whole. So you'll see that in the Gizmo, there's a bunch of different little parts to it. The outermost ring, the brown one here, allows me to scale the whole thing as a unit evenly. And then the arrows allow us to move up or down, left or right, forward or backwards on those exact planes. And then the squares allow us to move in those planes as well, but in 2 directions. So the blue one will move it up, down, right or left. It'll stay on that blue plane while it's moving. And then finally, it allows us to rotate things. So if I put my wireframe back on, You can see that if I rotate around on the blue circle, it'll rotate around that blue axis. If I rotate on the green one, it'll rotate on the green axis. And then the black one in there allows us to rotate based on where the camera is. So these can all be used different ways to get us to where we want the shapes to be. But yeah, now that I've got that added, I'm going to go ahead and make a muzzle shape out of it, a really rough one. I'm going to go from the left side. I'll move it forward. I'll get rid of the solo so I can see it in relationship to the rest of the head. I'm going to shrink it down vertically, maybe a little bit more horizontal, move it along that plane so it stays facing forward. You'll see that it's super wide right now, so I'm going to shrink it and make it a little bit more narrow. I'm going to look around a little bit, maybe a little bit like that, a little up. Maybe a little bit rotated so that we have a little bit different surface there. And that looks pretty decent to start with, okay? So once you've got your shape in the right space, I can hit validate. It's gonna be super happy there. And I can go back to my move tool and adjust things until I get something that I really like. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Front view, ooh, it looks really funky on the front view just because sometimes when you grab those shapes, they don't move in other planes the way that you might want them to. So we're just gonna adjust things accordingly. And then we still have our symmetry tool on, so we're able to kind of adjust and make sure that's looking good. But yeah, that's a rough muzzle shape. I'm pretty happy with that as far as what I'm gonna be working with. I'm gonna go ahead and delete the lower subdivisions there just to make my life easier. So along with the move tool is the drag tool. It's very similar to the move tool except for a little bit more precise in its motions. So if I grab something with the drag tool, you can see that it's a little bit more aggressive. Even though my intensity isn't as high, it's a little bit more aggressive with how it works. It works pretty well with dynamic topology. Dynamic topology will allow us to grab shapes and move them a little bit more aggressively. Like, for example, if I turn that off and I want to like pull this up really high, I even turn up the intensity, pull it up really high, you can see that the geometry is looking really bad in there. If I turn dynamic topology on and do the same sort of thing, it's gonna grab it and be a lot more fluid with its movements and adjust things until it has the shapes that you kind of want. A little bit better to work with dynamic topology on, especially when you're dealing with something like that. So I'm just gonna grab in here, just gonna give him a little bit of a nose shape. The dynamic topology will kind of help with some of these shapes. We'll go back to move and turn that back off. And we'll get a rough nose shape in here. I kind of dig that. All right, now that we've done the drag and move tools and the gizmo, I want to focus on the brush. The brush is a tool that allows us to brush on a layer of thickness into our material. So you can see that as I'm working, it's adding more on top of that material, making those shapes move outward. Now, there's also, like many of these others, we'll have a subtraction mode, which does the opposite. It'll let us shrink, deflate that mesh a little bit until we get it to go in. And for what I'm going to do next in this model, I'm actually just going to use the subtraction on here and make it go inwards for where the eyes go. So I'm making a little indent where my eyes will be. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's just something to work with. Something else that's important with these drawing tools is there's something called the lazy rope stabilizer. If you look at what I'm drawing, you can see where my pen nib is and the little dot is. The pen nib makes a little line to the dot, and that is called the lazy rope. I'm a person that has kind of shaky hands, so having something that helps straighten that kind of stuff out for me is really helpful. And that can be adjusted right here in the brush settings, down here, lazy rope stabilizer. I'll keep mine at 20 to 30 area. I'll sometimes go longer if I want to make sure my lines are really smooth and straight, but it really helps me to make sure that I have nice and straight lines. But you'll see here, if I increase the lazy rope stabilizer, that line becomes really long and allows me to make sure that I'm kind of making my shapes the way I want them to be. Let's go back here to The program defaults to 10, and you'll find that the same sort of micro adjustments can happen with any of these sliders as well. So if I go in here and I grab and pull left and right, it's going to move pretty evenly with how I move it. But if I go in here and I want to get it to, like, say 35, it's kind of hard to get it to 35 precisely. So I can move my cursor up a little bit and then have a lot more precision with that and let go when I need to. So keep that in mind when you're trying to adjust things and it's a little bit difficult. Just slide it further away from the slider and you will have a little bit more precision. So yeah, there's an eye socket. It's not great. It's kind of ugly. I'm actually going to go ahead and move this whole thing up a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to work with. Move this guy down. Perfect. That'll work for now. Because what I need to do now is add the eye in so I can have that as a reference to make the rest of the eye material. So I'm going to add another sphere. This time I'm going to put mirror on it. Go into my Gizmo Tool and shrink them and move them out, up, and forward. Let's see here, a little bit more in, a little more down. Now with the eyes, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but the bigger the eyes, kind of the more cartoony the effect you get is. So you can adjust the eyes accordingly, make them a little bigger, they become softer and friendlier, but more realistic heads are going to have much smaller kind of eyes. They tend to read as more real because that's how our eyes actually work. So you can play around with your personal preference in that however you want, but I tend to like a little bit larger. I even like a little bit more vertical than horizontal, just to give it a little bit better of a shape. Now I've got a rough eye shape. It's not good at all. It's kind of weird, but this is where I can start coming in and fine tuning shapes to make it make a little bit more sense. In fact, I can tell right now that I need to subdivide the head shape. I'm going to subdivide it and bring it lower, delete the lower one. And this way I can have a little bit more control over how that geometry is looking. Bringing that in, adjusting some of the eyes here. I'm going to grab the back of the, so right now I'm actually grabbing the back of the eye, a part that we don't see, and adjusting it, the eye socket there. Going to the front view, bring those in, bring that down. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And this is a little bit funky here still, so I'm going to kind of validate that. I'll delete the lower and then go back to the move tool. And I'm going to move the eye, change the eye shape a little bit to be a little bit more pleasing based on what I want it to be. Decrease the intensity a little bit. Yeah, that's making me happier. You can really take your time playing around with these shapes here. Brushing in some more of the like eyebrows, usually pretty good. You can also subtract more of the inner eye, give yourself a sharper line between where the eye and the face is. Move a little bit more. But yeah, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to brush just a tiny bit underneath this so that I bring that forward. Brush a little bit more. And this is going to kind of bring us to one of the next tools I like to use a lot, which is the smooth tool. So if you look at this right now, it's kind of chunky in this area here. If I want to get rid of that chunkiness, I can hit the smooth tool. Now I have it in 2 locations, but whenever you got one of these main brushes, the smooth tool will also be in this little shortcut area down here. So if I hit smooth here, what this will do is it'll smooth everything out very evenly. You'll see that those bumps that I made are evening out. It's a little bit more nice of a shape, more pleasing of a shape there. These go hand in hand, the smooth tool and the brushes, and that's why there's a shortcut right there. I can now hit that smooth button and I'll go back to that brush, and I can kind of fine tune what I need to do here. That kind of thing, and then we'll smooth it again. Yeah, that's looking better. I'm going to grab a move here, shrink that tool a little bit. Grab the eye, I think, bigger.
I think I'm going to subdivide this one more time. And that's looking pretty good. Smooth out the area here along the nose. That's looking pretty good. Any other adjustments I can just kind of play around with as I need them. Moving things, shrinking that size a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Flatten that a little bit. But yeah, Smooth Tool is another one that's super useful. You can use the Smooth Tool over here, but the problem is you can't immediately backtrack into the other tool. Like if I use this, there's no smooth option on the bottom right. But if I use the brush, there it is available to me whenever I want, and I can go back in and out without any issue. So yeah, is a rough shape. I'm gonna go ahead and just do a couple more things till I get this into a place I really like it. Yeah, it's pretty good. Smooth this area out a little bit more. Get rid of the wireframe. You can kind of see the shape without necessarily seeing that geometry in it. Smoothing out the top. I'm digging that. I'm going to brush one more time, subtract along this line here. And you can see how aggressive that is, but if I go in here and smooth it, those go away real fast. So there you go. That's the Smooth Tool. One more tool I like to use in here is the Flatten Tool. You'll see that if I want like right now, the inside of this area, I'm not really a fan of. I want it to be a little bit more flat. So I can go in here, get this on so you can see it. I can flatten that out, or like maybe even the top of the muzzle here. We can just flatten that out a little bit better shape. So maybe that nose tip isn't going up quite as much. And that Flatten Tool is pretty useful for like, say see how the side over here is a little funky? I can intensify that. And I can just kind of, make sure I have the right tool, flatten that out, get it to a point where it's nice and smooth. A little bit happier there. I'm going to brush here, subtract in this area, smooth. This is kind of my jawline I like to work with. Bring this up a little bit more, bring that in. We're going to be removing a lot of the back of that for the fursuit head part itself. Let's see, this is a little bit big. That's looking cool. There we go. Flatten this. It just flattens out the inside of that area. I'm going to then move this out a little bit more, widen the eyes a little bit. Yeah, cool. And one more smooth along the eyebrows, and I think we're good with that section there. Cool. So there are those parts. Next is we've done a bunch of these shapes. We've added muzzles, we've added some eyes. Now, if I'm not super happy with the eyes, if I look at this, I can see that the eyes are huge in the back area. Now, my aesthetics might be that I want this even bigger, right? A little bit less, a little bit flatter of the roundness on the shape. And if I do that, well, yeah, it looks pretty good. Now I've got pieces of it hanging out the back of the head, and I really don't want to do that. This is where a trim tool comes in super handy. Trim tool is something I use quite regularly. I'm actually going to grab it and move it up a little bit further. And I'm going to move we'll leave that right there. It's a trim tool. If I start with the trim tool, there's two basic tools when we're using the trim tool. One is a line and one is a polygon. Now, I'm going to start with the line. There is a first basic setting here called auto validate. If I have auto validate on, I go to X-ray. If I have auto validate on, when I draw my line, it's going to immediately cut out the side that is shaded. You'll notice too, if you have symmetry on this part, sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. In this case, I'm going to be cutting a mirrored eye. So there's a left and a right side of this thing. I do not want this to be symmetrical because I want to cut just the one side. So I'm going to get rid of symmetry. I'm going to go onto the side here. I'm going to draw my line. Now, whatever side that shaded part is on is going to get removed immediately. So if I click that, you see now it's a flat plane. And if I get rid of X-ray, it no longer sticks out above the thing, above the head. So that's very nice for what I'm going to be doing for now. I'll go into a little bit more complicated way later of how I'm going to get rid of some more of that. But for now, that's kind of the starting point of what I want to do with getting rid of the line. If I don't do that, if I go back in here, put my X-ray back on, if I get rid of the auto validate, I have a little bit more control. So you'll see I make my line here. Now I can grab it by grabbing on the shaded part. And if I click the green button, boop, it'll get rid of that part for me. So if you want to be a little bit more sensitive and take your time making sure that's exactly right, having auto validate off is important. And then when you want to do your next cut, you got to make sure to hit reset because that'll reset that line for you. Next, we're going to do the polygon style of trim. Now, there are kind of two ways to get this started. First off is the lasso tool, which just allows us to draw. When I draw like this, I might not be able to get what exactly I want the first try. For me, it's a little difficult to do that first try. But if I go into polygon, you can see that this is made up of a bunch of points that we can adjust and edit. Now, I also find it a little bit easier to just start with the polygon. So if I go into polygon here, I draw my line segment. You can then grab anywhere on this line segment to create a new point. So like that. Now we've got our 3-point spline. And I'm going to adjust this to a point where I'm really happy with it. I got nice on the left side only. I can actually turn symmetry on again because I want it to be even throughout the whole part. And I'll move my pieces around until I get about the right shape that I want. Now, there's a few things that are important to remember when we're doing this removal tool. First off, anything inside the white is going to be removed. You can actually flip it by hitting the flip button on the right, and you can remove the outside of this segment. But for what we're doing, we're just going to be working on the inside. Second, if I accidentally make too many points and I don't want that many points in here, you can get rid of a point by dragging one on top of another. So drag the one you don't want onto one you do, and it will remove the excess points. And then, like I said, anytime you want to add points, just grab somewhere in the line segment and you can just add it. And then finally, if you want a point to be sharp as opposed to rounded, just click on it. So boop, if I click on that, now that point is a really sharp point, which can be really helpful for getting these last little bits. If I want this mouth shape to be a little bit more how I kind of like it, I might make those outside points really sharp, move these inside areas up, have a nice rounded curve on the top, have a sharp point in the back corner, a little bit of a rounding, and then a sharp line segment for that lower jaw area. And that's going to work for me as far as what I want to work with. And then I hit the green button, boop. Oop, make sure you have your area selected. Hit the green button, and now we have our hole for the mouth. Now it's a little funky. We're going to do some things in a little bit to make that a little bit better, but for right now, it's good for what I'm working with. All right, so the next part I'm going to work on is I'm going to make a nose here. So we're going to add in another shape. We're going to do another sphere, add the gizmo, move it forward, shrink it down a little bit, move it up, get to the front here, like this, shrink it down that way, and then shrink it down this way, forward, perfect. Validate, we don't need to mirror this one. And then I'm going to do some movement here. For this guy, I'm just going to kind of only use my move tool to get the rough shape. This will be a little bit toonier nose. But it's really not too hard to go from toony to something a little bit more complicated. So there we go. There's a really rough toony shape. We'll bring these back a little bit so it kind of blends in. Like that. So there's a super simple toony shape for a nose. If I want to make it more complicated, I can do a couple of things. First off, like I want to go into my wireframe. I want to get rid of my subdivisions. I'm going to add in a dynamic topology, or as I work with this next step, I'm going to use my move tool here and then kind of play around with the shapes. I'm going to go try to make a little bit more of a realistic nose here, just something cute that we can work with, because I want to show you. So we got dynamic topology. This is how the dynamic topology will work. It's just going to like change things as we're working on them. I can grab my drag tool. I got that going. A little bit more aggressive here. Bring these out. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then a lot of these dogs will have these little crease in their noses. So what we're going to use for that is the crease tool. This is one I specifically love the dynamic topology for, because sometimes it doesn't really work the way that you want it to. Dynamic topology, yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work exactly the way that you want it to. So the crease tool here is going to allow me to have the dynamic topology on. It's going to allow me to really get in here and make this kind of like crease shape. And you'll see that I use the lazy rope to help me try to make those points around the center. Then I can come in here and smooth again. Yeah, and that's a really nice, decent, rough shaped dog mouth. So I'm gonna go in here, crease the lip here. I like to have that crease. I can also come in here. If you invert the crease, you can create a nice sharp line along lips and stuff. So if I come back in here, I want to do some move tools, even that out a little bit more. I'll go to the front. It's a little bit narrow in the front, so let's smooth that out a little bit more. We'll smooth it. I want to smooth out the lip here a little bit. Actually, with dynamic topology, just gonna even that out so it's not quite so funky. And then this lower lip as well. There we go. That's looking a little bit better. I'm gonna move it in a little bit more. Get some rough shapes in here. That looks fine for right now. We're going to do some tricks in video 3 that really will let us pop this part into something a little bit stronger as far as what we're looking for. But yeah, for right now, that's the crease tool. I can go back in here, crease the top again, give it a nice strong lip there. Here we go. Move a little bit more. Smooth that out. That's pretty good. I can even grab in here and move some of the interior of the mouth up as I'm working on it. Try not to move too much of the lower mouth, but you know, getting that area moved up a little bit will be helpful for later. A little bit more smoothing. And yeah, there we go. So yeah, I'm okay with this for right now as far as the mouth goes. One more part to add in here, a rough sphere. We're going to add another mirrored sphere, gizmo it up to the top. This time we're going to make some ears. We're going to shrink them this way. I'm going to rotate them, move them back a little bit, bring them in, down a little bit. Just get a really rough shape of where those go. And then once they're decent, I'll validate, and then I'll move them. Get their intensity up here. All right, so sometimes when you're working on things that are mirrored like this, you'll find that it's not quite moving the way that you want it to because it's working with the mirror onto the other side. If you turn off symmetry while the thing has the mirror modifier on here, you can work on it without working on the mirrored side as well, which is pretty helpful. So I'm going to turn that on just for this ear. Go to the left side here, rotate this forward, give us some shape in there. Front here, bring this in. This is where like a drag tool can be really useful because we can decrease the intensity but increase the shape here. Drag tool will be a little less about grabbing all of the parts and just focusing on grabbing where your brush is. And then I can take my brush and subtract the inner ear section here. My lazy rope is, I'll set that down just a little bit here. Give myself a rough ear shape here. And smooth that out. Maybe drag the point just a little bit up so we get a nice sharp ear. These are looking pretty good. Yeah, so that's okay. I'm gonna move these in a little bit more. Backside, get this backside of the ears looking really good. That's better. Smooth it one more time around that point. Drag these a little bit sharper. All right, so that gets us to our rough dog shape. Everything in here is kind of where I wanted to get to in lesson 2. We learned a lot about brushes, about how to use the move tool, dragging, different things like subdividing and dynamic topology, adding new meshes, that kind of stuff. But next time we're going to be focusing a lot more on the more complicated tools, quad remeshing, Boolean operations, and exporting things for 3D printing. So stay with us next time and we'll get you ready to print your own fursuit head. Well, thanks for coming to the second video on the Nomad Sculpt series here at the Fuzz Academy. I want to give a big shout out to all the Patreon sponsors. Thank you so much for everything. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this kind of thing. If you like my work and you want to give me a little support that way, feel free to join on my Patreon. I do post a little bit more about what I'm doing behind the scenes there, but it's a nice way to be able to support me and help make sure that I make more of these videos. Next week, we'll be finishing our series, focusing a lot on a little bit more of the complicated things. Things like Boolean and masking and extrusion, stuff like that. And we're also going to be learning about how to export your models for 3D printing and a bunch of other little things that I haven't discussed here yet. Thanks for coming. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, comment if you want to learn anything else or I missed something. And if you like my stuff, I'd love it if you've subscribed. So thank you again. I'll see you next time here at the Fuzz Academy. Bye.